they rain down relentlessly. Town after southern Lebanese town, peppered with Israeli missiles, and what has now become the nation's deadliest day of conflict since the war in 2006. With towns to the south bombarded, roads to the north creaked forward as thousands fled. There was bombing, we got into the car and we just drove, he says. We don't know what happened behind us, we're heading to Beirut. It's an evacuation en masse, at haste, and with no time to prepare. But first thing this morning, before the airstrike started, the Rafik Hariri hospital in Beirut was already preparing for what might lie ahead. Preparations, some of which were happening 3 floors below the ground in their basement.
This area is an ICU shelter.
Right, okay. Have all of these just been brought down recently?
Yes, now, this week.
Right, okay.
And you see, they are still in nylon.
Yeah.
We are now putting them in place.
So by the end of the week then?
Yes.
What are you hoping for?
This weekend will be finished.
You can have a full emergency room down in the basement.
Not emergency, ICU, intensive care. Because we have sockets for oxygen in the walls, we have suction, we have anesthesia, we have everything here.
How expensive is it to do all this?
Very much.
Have you got that money to spare?
No, we are borrowing.
Immense amounts of time, effort and money that this hospital does not have is being spent on an eventuality they hope never becomes their reality. But for all their hope, even in the time we've been here, there have been airstrikes to southern Lebanon and to an area northeast of here. Airstrikes that are only increasing in frequency. Bomb blasts that came with a warning, albeit a short one. The Israel Defense Force texted phones across the south of Lebanon that airstrikes were coming this morning. Houses which they said were hiding Hezbollah weapons were the target. In all, some 800 targets were hit.
For those who have not yet understood, I want to clarify Israel's policy. We do not wait for a threat, we anticipate it. Anywhere, in any arena, at any time. We eliminate senior officials, we eliminate terrorists, we eliminate missiles, and there's more to come.
By this afternoon, refugees fresh from the south were arriving in Beirut. This morning, this building was a school. Now, it's a shelter for those fleeing war. So far, more than 300 have arrived here. They're expecting the numbers to swell. And as of tomorrow, all schools, universities and nurseries nationwide will be shut. Before today, more than 100,000 people had already fled Israeli missiles and their homes in the south, like this enraged woman.
No.
This evening, just like last Friday, Israel bombed a densely populated Hezbollah stronghold in southern Beirut. A targeted attack, Israel said, on a senior leader. For the staff at the Rafik Hariri hospital, the drumbeat to a war they don't want grows louder. Are you any more concerned now about a mass attack than you were 2 weeks ago? Or are you just always prepared?
No, we are prepared, but I said, me personally, I had an impression that nothing will take place in Beirut, at least. But after the last attacks, I'm pessimistic now.
Okay.
Yes.
So you prepared right now for, at any time,
yes,
it could all get very, very bad?
Yes.
The UN say they have grave concern and urged restraint on both sides, pleading for de-escalation. So far, it's fallen on deaf ears.
Paul McNamara in Beirut. Well, there's been reaction from Washington in light of the escalation. I'm joined now by our Washington correspondent, Siobhan Kennedy. Siobhan.
Well, Kieran, this morning President Biden met with the President of the UAE, His Highness President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, in the White House. It was a bilateral meeting inside the Oval Office. Remember, all the world leaders are in town this week for the UN General Assembly in New York. Of course, chief among the topics shared between the two today will have been the Middle East, and in particular the situation in Lebanon between Hezbollah and Israel. President Biden didn't really have much to say on it publicly, at least. Certainly he would have done in the meeting, but here's what he did say. Have a listen to this.
We also will discuss our efforts to end the war in Gaza and a number of regional issues. I've been briefed on the latest developments in Israel and Lebanon. My team is in constant contact with their counterparts, and we're working to de-escalate in a way that allows people to return to their homes safely.
Well, perhaps more importantly, this morning a Pentagon spokesperson held a gaggle with reporters and said in light of what's happening in Lebanon that the US would be increasing its military presence in the region. He said, out of abundance of caution, we are sending a small number of additional US military personnel forward to augment our forces that are already there, though he declined to provide any further details. We also know that his boss, the Secretary of Defense, held a call with his counterpart in Israel yesterday, confirming the US's commitment for Israel's right to defend itself, but also stressing, as they have done every day last week too, the importance of achieving an urgent diplomatic solution to this latest current crisis. Because that, of course, is the big fear for President Biden, that any American troops in the region become targeted as a result of this escalation in places like Syria and Iraq, as they have been in the past. He and, of course, Kamala Harris, facing an election in November, will be doing all they can to try and avoid that situation arising. Certainly that will be foremost in President Biden's mind as he travels later on today to New York for that UN General Assembly meeting.
Siobhan, thank you. Well, Sima Shineh was the head of research and analysis for the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad from 2003 to 2007 and is now the head of the Iran program at the Institute for National Security Studies in Tel Aviv. 274 killed by Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon in a day, 21 children. What military objective would Israel cite for these actions?
Well, I must say it's a strange question to start it from today. I would start it from the 8th of October, when Hezbollah decided to attack Israel with no reason, just to support Hamas that attacked Israel one day before. So we are in a war that Hezbollah decided a year ago, almost a year ago, to launch on Israel. Every day they are launching UAVs, missiles, rockets. Houses are burned, people are killed. 12 children, Druze children and Maljal Sams that were playing football were killed. So we shall start your question from the context. And the context is
talking
a year...
about, Ms. Shineh, we're talking about today, because it happened today and 21 children died today. I'm just wondering, what is the military objective that Israel is trying to achieve?
The military objective is not to kill children and not to kill women and not to kill civilians. And therefore, the spokesman of the military has come out 2 hours before and urged all Lebanese that do know that they have either in their houses or close to their houses ammunition, or rockets and missiles of Hezbollah to leave their houses. 2 hours before the attack in Arabic, and also there was an interception into the radio program in Lebanon in order to tell people to leave their houses if they know that there are arms there. If you looked on the pictures, you could see.
Israel would like its 65,000 residents to return to the north of Israel. How does this action make that more likely, or does it not just invite a retaliation and an escalation?
It might escalate the situation, no question about that, but we are a year that all these people, much more than 65,000, that are out of their houses. Some of them will not be able to go back because their houses were burned. But the only way, because Hezbollah decided that they will not stop the war until the war in Israel doesn't leave Gaza. I don't know what's the connection. That's Lebanon, that's Gaza. Lebanon is a state that was kidnapped by Hezbollah. And therefore, there is no other reason, no other way to bring our people back to their houses if Hezbollah will continue the war. The only way that Hezbollah, after a year, will understand that he cannot do it is by suffering,
they tried
casualties,
this,
and by understanding that we will not stop.
They tried this in 2006, didn't they? And it didn't work then. I just wonder why you think it would work now, and also
I think it
in terms of
I really think it worked in 2006. Nasrallah came out and said that if he would know what will be the result, he would not kidnap the Israeli soldiers in 2006. And 17 years since 2006, there were no fighting on the border. So it worked at 2006. And unfortunately, that's probably the only way. Neither Israel, no one in Israel wants a war. But at the end of the day, this is the only way to bring our people back to their homes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Shine. I'm very sorry to interrupt. We don't have very much time, and you're an Iran expert in terms of the Israeli side of things. And I wanted to ask you, Iran has said Israel's trying to goad it into a regional conflict. How do these actions help in terms of containing Iran?
Iran has built Hezbollah, and they will have to decide if they want to stop the war and to bring to enable us to bring back our people, or they want to continue. At the end of the day, consultations between Iran and Hezbollah are every day, and they will have to decide what is the best way to do it. At the end of the day, we are fighting on 7 fronts. Iraq, Yemen, Houthis, your country is part of the coalition in the Red Sea that the Houthis decided also to fight because Iran is supporting them with missiles. So what do you want Israel to do? I mean, are we going to sit and pray to God to help us?
Okay. Sima Shine, thank you very much for speaking with us. We have to leave it there, but thank you. Over now to the Pennines, across the Pennines rather, to Liverpool, where Kathy is at the Labour conference. Kathy.
Thank you, Kieran. In a minute, we'll have all the news from the conference here. But first, I'm joined by Sir William Patey, the former British ambassador to several countries, including Saudi Arabia and Iraq, who's here with the Labour Middle East Council. Sir William, hundreds now dead in Lebanon just today, according to the government there. The UK's got to tread this difficult diplomatic path, hasn't it, but as an ally of both Lebanon and Israel. How do you suggest they do that?
Well, it is difficult. They have to reassure Israel that they are supportive of its security, while at the same time sending a clear message to the Israeli government that actually what we need is de-escalation. We need a ceasefire in Gaza, we need a ceasefire in Lebanon, and we need to stop the activities in the West Bank by the extreme settlers. So you've got that balance to strike between the criticism of Israel and reassuring Israel that we're also a friend of Israel. There have been calls today for arms embargoes and all sorts of things.
Well, to go further, I mean, are those calls justified?
Well, I think the government has gone, taken reasonable steps to analyse the arms supplies to Israel that might be used in Gaza in contravention of international humanitarian law. So they've done that. But you've got a balance between reassuring the Israelis that they can live behind secure and safe borders, but at the same time saying their denial of justice for the Palestinians is unacceptable. It's a difficult balancing act which the government has to get right.
And as the war escalates, if it does, as this conflict escalates, does the UK government have to avoid sort of taking sides?
No, I think they have to take the side of peace and they have to take the side of de-escalation. So they send clear messages to Israel that their escalation of recent weeks, and it's clear that the Israeli government have escalated the indiscriminate attacks against the Hezbollah, the killing of the Hezbollah leader in an apartment block in Lebanon, and now extensive bombings throughout Lebanon, Beirut, elsewhere in the Beqaa Valley. That is an escalation because we've assumed that nobody wanted a wider Middle East war. I'm not sure we can assume that that's the current position of the Israeli government.
But a ground invasion from Israel, you don't see that over the horizon?
I see it's a distinct possibility. I mean, the logic is I think the Israelis are looking for an excuse. If you look at these provocations, if you like, they're hoping for a Hezbollah response that would justify them going, despite the terrible history of Israeli invasions. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that the invasion in 1982 led to the formation of Hezbollah. It didn't exist before an Israeli invasion. So there's a long history of failed invasions.
And so what are the implications for the region more broadly if there is a ground invasion?
Well, then there's a possibility of Iran getting involved in support of Hezbollah. And we saw when Iran fired over 300 missiles and rockets at Israel that the UK and the United States came to Israel's defense in that sense. So they would be faced with a dilemma again. Imagine Iran getting directly involved in defending Hezbollah and defending Lebanon. The prospects of a wider Middle East war are clear.
And just very briefly, Lebanon's Prime Minister said it's a genocide that we're seeing. You know, hospitals have been targeted, women and children killed. Your take on that?
I think the word genocide is used pretty indiscriminately. It's clearly the possibility of war crimes and atrocities. Targeting civilian areas is indisputably a war crime. So I always worry when you throw around the genocide word. War crimes are bad enough.
Sir William Patey, thank you very much for joining us. And since we've been on air, the Lebanese government has announced that 356 people have now died in attacks today in Lebanon.